Hey, thanks for joining me today on Just Cook with Michael. You know, a few years ago, I was in southern Portugal in the Algarve area, beautiful beaches. Typically in southern Portugal, you see these beautiful women, these guys that look like Ronaldo, and I'm thinking like, oh, it must be the Mediterranean diet. These people are so fit. And then as I'm on the beach, I noticed, what are they eating? Everywhere I see people eating these donuts. It's a huge thing down there in the beaches of Algarve to have these donuts while you're suntanning. They're called Bolas de Berlim. And as the name sounds, it means balls of Berlin. So this recipe came over from Germany. In Germany, they're known as Berliners, and they're typically filled with jams. And it's thought that in the late 1930s, a Jewish family escaped Germany and came to southern Portugal and started selling these along the beach. Of course, Portuguese are very fond of custards, so they started adapting the donuts to be filled with custards, and it took off. So like always, when working with a yeast dough, I like to make sure my ingredients are warm. This is at 113 degrees. Ideally, you want it between 105 and 115. And we put 2 packages of yeast, 2 tablespoons of sugar. Give those a nice stir. Now I'm going to put in 1 cup of butter, which is 2 sticks. This is soft. I just cut it up in small pieces to let it incorporate into the flour well. And again, anytime you see butter going in a dough, butter is a shortening, just like typical, a lot of times we call lard shortening. Butter, anything with fat, the egg yolks I'm going to put in here, shortening. So what that does is it shortens gluten strands. Anytime you put fat in dough, it shortens the gluten strands and it makes the finished product more tender and crumbly, like a cake. I have my 2 egg yolks. Salt in there. This is all-purpose flour. For things like donuts and cakes, you don't need a bread flour. First, you want to bulk proof the dough for about an hour. Then you're going to divide it into about 55-gram portions, a little bigger than a golf ball. Roll it into the shape of a ball and let it proof for an additional 1 hour. Now I'll separate the egg yolks for the pastry cream. Get the rind from 1 lemon. Try not to get the pith as you're cutting the rind off of the lemon. I'm cutting them in big pieces, that way it'll be easier for me to take out after I'm done using them. Now I'll use the juice of a half a lemon. Okay, now we're going to make the pastry cream. This is a custard filling, kind of similar to a custard you'd use with pastry de nata. Some key things: you don't want to cook it over high heat. Very low heat is always best when working with custards. I'll put in the egg yolks, condensed milk. The difference between condensed milk and evaporated milk is condensed milk has sugar in it. 1 tablespoon of cornstarch. And that is one key difference with pastry cream, is that it almost always has a starch in it. A lot of times chefs will use flour. Cornstarch to me is just more of a pure starch. It leaves a cleaner taste. Put in my lemon juice. You want to make sure your cornstarch is mixed in well before you start heating up this mixture, or else you could get clumps of cornstarch. Put in my lemon rind. Now I'm going to switch to my spatula. And if we were making a custard without starch, you would just want to cook it to about 170, 175 degrees Fahrenheit. But since there's starch in there, you want this actually come to a little bit of a boil. The reason you do that, there's an enzyme in the yolk that could break down the starch we just put in there. And the purpose for the starch is it just makes it more stable, makes the pastry cream a little more pipeable, because I'm going to put this in the piping bag, and it just makes it hold up a little better, so it's not oozing out. So if you just heated up this mixture to 170, you wouldn't deactivate that enzyme, and after a few hours, that enzyme could start breaking down that starch, and therefore it wouldn't be as resilient. 130 right now. Around 150, egg proteins start to denature and coagulate. And just keep on giving it a gentle stir until it starts to bubble up. And once it starts to boil, you want to turn down your heat. And sometimes you have to just stop stirring it for a second to see if it's going to start to boil. Turn my temperature really low. If it did get too hot and you get some scrambled egg type of pieces in there or any lumps, you can right away while it's warm just strain it through a strainer into a clean bowl. This is getting much thicker. Then every once in a while stop for just a few seconds to see if it bubbles up at all. Okay, and that's really thick there. You can see like I'm putting my spoon through it and you see how it doesn't even, it parts like the Red Sea, it doesn't come together. That's kind of what you're looking for. And the temperature you're looking to achieve if you have an instant read thermometer. Now I can see it's bubbling. Not sure if you could perceive that, but after I stop stirring, there's little bubbles, and that's when you see those little bubbles, you're about another 30 seconds and you're done. This is at 194, so it's done. That's the temperature you want to get it to, is about 190. And now I'll take it off the heat, but you want to put it in your refrigerator and let it cool down. So there's a piece of lemon rind. I'll take that out. As this cools down, it'll get thicker. All right, the donut dough has been proofing here. Knead it for about 2 minutes. Now the next step is just to portion out the bolage. Traditionally, they're about 50 grams. That's probably a little bit bigger, maybe like 20% bigger than a golf ball. And when you're forming it into a ball, you kind of like, your fingertips are loose, almost like a cage, and then it's your palm that's forming it into a ball. You could use 2 hands, form them into a little ball shape, and then let them proof for another hour. Another dish from the Algarve area of southern Portugal is the famous cataplana seafood dish. I have that recipe on my website, justcookwithmichael.com. I found that cooking the donuts somewhere between 5 to 5.5 minutes was perfect. So I let some of the oil go into the paper towel, but almost immediately go right into your sugar and just give it a nice toss and just reserve them. You can eat them like this, but since we're going to fill them with the pastry cream to make the traditional Bolas de Berlim, we're going to let them cool down a bit. They need to cool down before you pipe in that cold pastry cream. Okay, my oil temperature is about 375. All right, donuts are cooked, cooling off. Probably want to let them cool off for at least 30 minutes and get our pastry cream ready, put it in a piping bag. Another thing you could do is get like a quart size storage bag and just snip the very corner of it, and that makes a pretty good impromptu pastry bag. With pastry bags, you always want to cover, let it droop over your hand. It makes it much easier to fill. The recipe does make about 22 of the Bolas de Berlim. 22, and I would say the average weight was probably about 55 grams. In there, and then kind of like a tube of toothpaste, just push it all to the tip. Here is your finished donut. You can see how just nice and moist that is in there. Just, oh, geez. You could eat them just like this or fill them. To fill your donut, you want to just make a little cut, maybe about halfway through. These smell so good. I've already had 3. Could be trouble. Thanks for joining me. Now go cook for someone you love.